It's fine. Problem solving.
Awesome. Well, like, comment, subscribe for us because we're going to talk today a little bit about a lot of things, but we're going to start off with ableism language. Um, One of the reasons why I wanted to talk about ableism language today is because I wanted to not only talk about it and teach, but also use it as a point of accountability. Growing up, especially at the time that we grew up in, there was I feel like a heightened uh, ableist language usage where like the R slur was really highly used, and it wasn't even highly used like with my parents, but it was more with my peers.
Yeah,
And
for
that
sure.
resulted in, yeah, and not to like separate myself from the problem behavior, but that resulted in me having using that language with my peers. I was in the environment, I learned it, so I used it. And then I had to unlearn it. And I think it's still an ongoing process of learning, of unlearning how to use ableist language and switching to language that is more um,
Inclusive.
inclusive. Thank you, thank you. I don't know why I was losing that word.
It's fine. We all lose words.
Yeah. So some of it was ableist language can be harmful to people with disabilities. What is ableist language? Ableism is the belief that people with disabilities are somehow flawed and need to be fixed. It manifests in various ways, both personally and institutionally, and often involves treating people with disabilities as inferior to those without. At its heart, ableism is a form of discrimination. Discrimination can be either intentional or unintentional and stems from the belief that people without disabilities are superior to those that have them. So, some of the ableist words that I just want to go over real quick are important. And Robin, just cut in to because I know that you have like a lot of background knowledge. So I'm just gonna say the thing, and then if you have more background knowledge, let's go into that. So like dumb, the word dumb to say someone or something isn't intelligent, but its true definition is a person who is unable to communicate verbally or vocally.
We generally tend to use non speaking now, just as a caveat, but this word may not generally be associated, and people may not be familiar that this is historically how non speaking populations were defined and characterized. So, yeah, and you'll notice a trend and a pattern throughout all of these words. None of them are basically insinuating anything good. They are put downs, they are insults, they are demeaning. All of these words have the intention of that inferiority of disability. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And then they used to also say like someone was blind, deaf, and dumb, and that was like a combination. So dumb is there. Then we have lame. We say lame when we mean something is boring or dull, but this word actually refers to body parts, especially limbs that don't function properly or just simply don't function. Um, so there's lame. Um,
Mm-hmm.
then
Now we say non
spastic,
ambulatory.
non-ambulatory. Yes, yes. Now there's spastic when someone is behaving in a chaotic or ironic manner or erratic manner. We call them spastic. However, this term refers to muscle control issues, such as those that occur with the condition cerebral palsy.
I remember calling people spazzes in high school, and
Yeah,
like, that's yikes. Yeah, don't do it.
exactly. And Beyonce recently came under fire for this, and she actually went back and changed the language in her song. So I was really
Good.
happy to see that. I mean, so
Love
that I
Bay.
mean, you know what I
Nice.
mean? It could be that simple. And then there's ableist words and phrases based on neurodivergence, right? Ableist language can also stem from differences in brain function and may describe people who are neurodivergent. For instance, obsessive compulsive disorder is a mental health condition that includes obsessive thoughts and ritualistic behaviors. However, we often misuse this term in casual conversations to describe everyday things. We might say someone is OCD about cleaning, meaning that they're cleaning their house often and thoroughly. Or we say that they are so obsessed with things like someone's hair color or item of clothing, even if we have never seen them before and will never see them again. When we use these words about differences in mental health, we minimize the experiences of people with very real mental conditions. And because many forms of neurodiversity are not visible to outsiders, we may be unknowingly using these words around people with the same conditions we're mocking.
That's the big takeaway. It's like what I tell students all the time when you're like developing a treatment plan or you're developing a functional behavior assessment or you're basically writing anything that's going to be used in practice or with a participant or a learner, if they read the thing that you wrote about them, how would that make them feel about themselves? Would that make them feel empowered? Would that make them feel disempowered? Would that make them feel badly about who they are? If so, you need to change that. You need to reframe it. So, one thing I do want to mention, I personally, now I've been diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. It was one of the acronyms in alphabet soup that I collected before I actually hit the right diagnosis of autism, because
Mm-hmm.
for a long time girls couldn't be autistic. You knew that. So, I collected OCD, I collected CPTSD, all these different alphabet soup letters. Um, just saying that you're obsessed with something does not necessarily have a lot of stigma to it, but it's when we basically take the pathology of obsessive compulsive disorder, like, oh, I'm so OCD, I have to have my house in order. It takes away from the real struggle of those who actually have the debilitating form of obsessive compulsive disorder, because there are people who literally can't leave their house because of those obsessions and those behaviors that manifest from those thoughts and those thought patterns. You can't escape them. Um,
Yeah.
but it's interesting because we're now seeing this with autism too, where it's like, oh, it's trendy to be autistic. It's trendy to get a diagnosis of autism. It's like, it I don't know if I'm going to use the right term, but it reminds me of the conversation we had where we were talking about standards of beauty and how like white women will tan, they will want to get braids, they will want to curl their hair, they will do all these things to emulate black standards of beauty, but yet they will still see themselves as superior to
Mm-hmm.
black people. And so it's the same thing here. It's like, yeah, you want to take autism and you want to make it about you, and it's cool if you do it. But if we do it and we say, hey, we're actually disabled, then all of a sudden it's not okay. And you don't want to provide that support. So it's a double standard and it's gross. And especially when you say, oh, we all got a little bit of the autism or everyone's a little autistic, you're really taking away from that real disability that many of us actually face every single day. There's good and
Yeah.
bad. I just want to throw
Yeah.
that out there. So, like,
Yeah.
I have strengths, I have areas of growth. We all do. Mine just
Mm-hmm.
happen to fit under the diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder. And that's it.
Exactly. No, 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 no. You're absolutely right. Thank you. That's exactly what I was kind of looking for. So I think that it's important to not just say don't do this. We also need alternatives for behavior. We need to say what should you do instead. So instead of saying stupid or the R slurs, say ignorant or dense. Instead of saying dumb, say ignorant or dense. Instead of saying crazy, nuts, psycho, etc., say bizarre or outrageous. Instead of saying I'm so OCD, you could say I'm particular. The obsessed, we just talk about the kind of
Mm-hmm.
nuance that and some of these might rest between. Instead of saying I'm ADD about X, say I'm unfocused, lame, boring, unexciting, blind leading the blind, unacknowledgeable. And there's a lot of those idioms like
Yeah,
falling on deaf
for
ears or
sure.
you didn't hear me, barren, desolate, unfruitful, crippled, disabled, derp, ignorant, dense. I haven't heard
That
derp in a long
one's
time.
yeah, it's more of a like last few years sort of thing, and I haven't seen it as much now. But also that SpongeBob meme. So I'm a big SpongeBob fan, but
Same.
the pose, you know which one I'm talking about. I don't have to
Yeah.
do the
Yeah,
imitative thing.
yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
gonna pull a Trump here. But
Yeah.
there's a
Please don't.
certain SpongeBob meme that has been taken into a context similar to this.
Hmm.
Also, I use the term wild. So, like, if something is unbelievable or, historically, I would say, crazy, that's so crazy. Now
Hmm.
I say, oh man, that's wild. And I've
Yeah.
really tried to work on that. And I still mess up. Like, stupid is so ingrained in our vocabulary. I know we were talking about this prior.
Yeah.
It's so hard to undo some of this. And like even my own internalized ableism is still there. I'm still working through that crap.
Same.
I will for the rest of my life. That's just part of it. Um, but taking one thing at a time. Like if man, I say the word dumb all the time. Work on phasing that one out. Then it becomes easier to work on crazy. Then it becomes easier to work on stupid and all these things. So do it systematically if that helps. That's what I try to
I,
do.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think that excuse me, it's going to be like one of those things you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to be perfect. We can't expect perfect um, people. So, we're as we go along, like one of the things that I think about is like you say dumb, but what do you mean by that? And then once you get to what do you mean by that, then that can be the great replacer of what you're trying to say. I think that as we go, it's like, the stupid, r slur, idiot, cretin, or moron. People say these words to imply something or someone is intelligent or worth their time, but they refer to people with intellectual disabilities. Instead of saying that a situation or person is frustrating, instead say that that situation or person is frustrating, ignorant, dense, unpleasant, cheesy, or awful. Idiot and moron were actually like designations or identifications for individuals with what they called low IQ, and we need to understand that low IQ is fake. It's a made up metric for a made up thing that we can't actually measure. That was intentionally, like, it started out with Alfred Binet
Super
in
racist.
yeah, it became super racist when it came to America. With Alfred Binet in France, it was actually just used. It was supposed to be helping students who were like placed in special education or needed additional support for education. When it was brought over to America and it became the Stanford Binet intelligence test, that's when it became racist. When it got to America, it became racist. Oh my god! And it became for
Shock. Oh
yeah.
my
So
god.
there's so much about it. I would read the book The Mismeasure of Man if you really want to learn about IQ and its racist histories and its actually beneficial, like benevolent origins. Which not everything is perfectly benevolent, but it was like the dude was really trying to help kids. But then he said this should not be turned into XYZ, and it got turned into XYZ. So yeah, The Mismeasure of Man is an incredible book that you got to read. And I think we went over everything else. We got a lot of these ones, but yeah. Is there
Baron's
any?
on here. Yeah,
Yep.
that's a good one. Also, just a little side note. So when we're talking about females assigned at birth, or people assigned female at birth and not having children, stop asking people when they're going to have kids. Like, please stop
Yeah.
doing that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm so over people asking about my uterus and like when I'm going to produce. Like, I'm more than just an oven for a fetus, like
Yeah.
100%. And like, that's one thing. So I physically cannot have children. And when people ask me, are you all going to have children? Because I am married to a man, people, I guess, just assume that because we are a heterosexual cisgender couple that we would have children because that's obviously what you do when you get married, right? There's no other
Mm-hmm.
reason to get married, um, ever, except to have children. But we're not religious, and that's not how we are, and all that sort of thing. But I've just started to look people in their face, not in their eyes, because autism, and I say,
Mm-hmm.
I actually can't have children. And that shuts down that conversation every single time. You don't have to give an explanation as to why. You don't have to go into any of that. No is a full sentence. So I just want to
Yes.
throw that out there because it's still considered derogatory to not have children and to either choose to not have children or to not be capable physically to have your own children. And that's
Yep.
BS.
Yep. It's male privilege that nobody's ever asked about my balls.
Right. It's
um,
so weird. It's like, why don't you ask my spouse? But you're not going to do that because, like, that's not who we ask. We ask the woman because the woman has that maternal instinct and she wants to have a child. I, listen, I know my limits and I know, like, I loved working with children. I thought they were fantastic. I had so much fun with kids, but then I could go home at the end of the night, I could decompress, and I could do what I needed to do to regulate my sensory. This was before I was diagnosed. I knew I couldn't explain that it was dysregulation, but I would come home and I would crash. I couldn't do it full time, and I know that. And like I that's the thing. Like, don't punish people because they know their own limits. Don't punish people because they make a decision that's different from the one that you have normalized.
and also, in behavior science, we don't punish people. We don't reinforce people. Punish
Right.
and reinforce behaviors. And some behaviors are at a level of zero for a reason,
Mhm.
you know? And yeah, no. And I think that also goes to, I don't know if you've heard about the female tax.
Oh, yeah.
Like for instance, like you have to pay for
Sanitary products and
sanitary
all that.
products
And
and
they're
all that.
expensive.
And man, I never have to pay. That's not something that comes out of my check. I don't have to pay for birth control. I don't have to pay for none of that. I just get to walk around and keep that money, and that money adds
And
up
no one
over
asked you about your
time.
balls.
And no one asked me about
The
my balls.
nerve.
So exactly. So all those things like those really add up. And the thing is, men never have to think about that.
Right. Unless we make
So
them. In which case,
exactly.
because like
And then
my
all of a
spouse
sudden,
has to. My
exactly.
spouse has to because I like tell him about it, and he's just like, yeah, you know what? That's not fair. You not only have to deal with menstruation, you have to deal with menopause, perimenopause, all these things, childbirth if you go through that. But you also have to pay more for everything, and doctors don't listen when you have concerns that are valid. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's wild.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like, look at culture. Look at, like, standards of beauty. There's a reason I don't wear makeup anymore. And part of it is to refute patriarchy because makeup is expensive. And I also have, like, skin allergies. So I have to wear, like, hypoallergenic, really good quality makeup. I don't do it anymore because, first off,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not leaving the house. I work from home. Second off, screw your standards of beauty because my skin is the best it's been in years because I don't put things on my face other than skincare. Clothing, if you have feminine presenting clothing on one side of a store and then you have masculine presenting clothes on the other, guess whose costs more? Guess whose
Mm-hmm.
costs more? Every
Yep.
single time. And yeah, it's everywhere. It's like our undergarments, it's our hygiene products, everything has ramped up. Just because something is pink, they'll put more money on it. What is it? The pink
Pink
tax.
tax.
I've
Yep.
heard that being used as well instead of feminine or female tax. I hear pink tax. And so the idea is that you have the same package of razors. One is pink, one is black. One has 4 blades, one has 4 blades. But one's going to
Yep.
cost way more because of that moisturizing strip, because we care more about our skin.
Yep. And then
BS.
also for the people who are men and selfish, it also hurts us.
Yeah.
Because if you like I go over to like get the body washes and the soaps and I'm looking at smell like, sandalwood or smell like shotgun gray. And then I go over and smell the women's products, they're like cherry blossoms
I know, they're
chrysanthemum
nice.
or whatever.
Yeah.
I'd be like, let me get this pink stuff because it smells amazing, and I
This
walk out
pink
smelling
stuff
fresh
with
because
glitter and shimmer.
it smells so much better,
It
and
does.
and then I can wash and I feel cleaner than the sandalwood or the gun toting gray or whatever they got for us because it all just
Gray.
has like this bland, musk, and
Yeah.
there's no kind
Hyper-masculine.
of musk. Yeah, there's no kind of musk I like. I don't like Elon Musk.
I don't
I
like
don't
musk.
like.
He's in there for sure. He
Yep.
definitely has a musk to his muskness. Yeah,
He's an entire
and that's
musk.
the thing. Like, it's hyper masculine versus hyper feminine, and it's like my thought is all the time: where do non-binary people go? Like, what do they go through? Because it's like, man, that's why I like Native, for instance, because it's very neutral packaging. The scents are very straightforward, stuff like that. So more of that sort of marketing and branding. Maybe that's where the non-binary persons go. I should probably ask some of my non-binary friends, but thinking
Non-binary
about that.
homies in the
Yeah,
chat,
shout out.
let us know to our NBs.
Yeah, and like you see it more and more where it's like, God, what was it? I think I might have sent you a TikTok about it, but even like food. So veganism, it's hyper masculine to basically argue against veganism. And so it's feminist to be vegan. And
Hmm.
like my brain is still comprehending and like kind of coming up with some of these thoughts and everything that at some point I'm sure we will discuss because I know you don't eat meat, I don't eat meat or dairy. And people might make comments about you, especially being a black man, like, oh, that's
Hmm.
odd. Why don't you
Yeah.
eat meat? Because it's
Yeah.
supposed to be masculine. Like Hardee's
Hmm.
commercials. Remember how sexist those were? And like these women would be like Hooters waitresses, like eating those
Yeah.
burgers on those commercials and everything. It's like, why are you using sex to sell food which sustains us? So
Yeah,
weird. Anyway.
I agree. We have Carl's Jr. over here instead of Hardee's, and the one that I remember is like I don't know if it was Carl's Jr. or Burger King, where like the woman was eating like a big like burger.
Yeah,
I forget what her name is. It was a white woman that was like super popular early 2000s. Um, but
I
you
can't
know,
remember, but I know what you're talking about.
yeah,
That's gonna
yeah.
bother me.
Well, just blurt it out when you think of it. We could slyly move on to our next subject, which I think is
Yeah,
really interesting.
let's do it.
There is a registered behavior technician (RBT) strike, and I think that this is really needed.
Agree. So, this has come after like over a year of trying to negotiate fair wages for RBTs. So it's not like this was just proposed a couple of weeks ago and people are just been out of shape about it. We're talking, what was it, 437 days. You all right over there? I saw the movement, making sure. Um, so yeah, 437 days waiting on management. So we're well over a year. We have been trying to get somewhere, and eventually, with the support of, I can't remember the organization, Teamsters Local 639, the RBTs decided to go on strike. I guess this has been going now for, was it been over a week? Um, so yeah, just basically looking for fair pay. And we're talking in Maryland, so the Northeast, little higher cost of living than where I am in the Midwest. And yeah, they just want to get paid fairly. You and I have both had those experiences as direct implementers trying to survive and make ends meet on very little money. Um, yeah, it's very relatable content, and we support them.
Absolutely. I remember before the RBT became a thing, or at least at the time, people didn't have to be RBT. I was a behavior interventionist. And I remember working from like 7 o'clock to like 6:30 p.m. at night, getting
Mm-hmm.
home at like 7. And then also having to study because I was a
Yeah.
student. And I made so little that every now and then I'd have to call my parents and ask if they can help me with rent money. And I remember feeling really embarrassed by it. Luckily, I'm fortunate enough to have parents that could support me. Grown man with a degree, and trying to in grad school, who was had a full time job, and I couldn't afford to live. I mean, when I was living in LA, this is when this was happening. So I mean, and I was not in. It was technically not LA. It's the Valley, so it's like North Hollywood. If you know North Hollywood, you know I wasn't living in the best areas.
Mm-hmm.
And they say that when people move to quote unquote LA or the greater Los Angeles area, the Valley, they always move to North Hollywood. But it was where I could afford, and I couldn't always afford it. And I was working super long days. I had individuals that I was working with that I was given to work with often were had high instances of hitting, biting, kicking, spitting,
Mm-hmm.
elopement, what have you. And it was like, and people were talking about. I saw some videos like they would always have to, buy extra pairs of clothing because they would get ripped or spit on, and then you'd have to have extra pairs. I remember that. And then
Yeah.
you have to do a lot of cleaning. There's a lot of things that you have to do, and then also you're sometimes buying things that can serve as reinforcers or that just items and stimuli,
Mm-hmm.
and getting copies and all this stuff to be able to support your clients, and because you care. And just like teachers care and they spend money out of their pocket, a lot of times
Yep.
RBTs and
Same
behavior
thing.
technicians and interventionists do the same thing. And I remember doing that, and I know that they deserve a fair pay. And if they're not giving a fair pay, which I wasn't getting a fair pay back then, they should be getting a fair pay because they are the direct implementers of these interventions. And I get that they may not have the highest levels of education, but there is a certain standard of living that should be supported by these organizations, especially when the prices are so high, especially when the prices increase.
Well, yeah, and we know that, well, Verbal Beginnings, I did look into it a little bit. It is a for profit organization. It is um, basically assumed that a lot of their income is coming from private insurance and private healthcare insurance. And so that said, we know that the reimbursement rates for private insurance are pretty high. And what was the wage that they were making? I think it's listed here. It was like $21 an hour, I think. I could be completely wrong on that, but it was not as much as they should be making. And granted, I know you only need like a high school diploma to do this job, and people are probably interpreting it that way. But once again, like you said, we also need to be able to have people care for themselves, because then when they come to work, they are cared for. They have been fed. They have slept well. They don't have to worry about working 14, 15 hours a day like you and I had to do to make ends meet, and then still need money and support. They're going to do a better job of working with these learners because they have that support themselves. So, it's one of those things. We know you have the income because you're gathering it from insurance. Now, where are those trickle down effects actually happening? And are they even a thing? So it's not that companies can't do it. It's just that they choose not to. And that's why it's a big issue.
Yep. Oh, and I I don't think that I was getting fairly reimbursed for my gas. I don't know about you,
I wasn't
but
either. No, I
yeah.
got mileage at one point, but then also I drove a van. It's funny because I'm not a great driver, and me thinking about driving a passenger van now really makes my spouse and I laugh, because it's like, how did you not wreck that every like, I hit curves all the time. Curves are not my friend. But
Hmm.
so I did that for a while, but then when I did get mileage, I feel like it was kind of like a but I also have always driven smaller vehicles and smaller cars with smaller engines. So for me, it worked out. But if you have any sort of like a crossover or an SUV or a truck, I'm in the Midwest once again. So a lot of
Yeah.
people I worked with had like bigger vehicles.
Hmm.
It was not fair reimbursement in that regard.
Oh my God, the amount of time. So I was in the
So
greater Los
exploited.
Angeles. Yeah, I was in the greater Los Angeles area. So like when I tell you I lived on podcasts, like I lived on podcasts because especially if I had like a sub case, because if you know where you're
Hmm.
going every day, it's easy. But if you have a sub case, and I had to go into like East LA sometimes, and I was just like, oh my God, this sucks. And it's just so much money to get there. And I remember like I had to fill up gas once a week at least. At least it was
Yeah.
probably more like every 5 days.
What kind of a
And
vehicle did you have then, just for context?
I had an
Do you
Acura
remember?
MDX. I still have an Acura
Okay.
MDX, a different one, but I had an Acura MDX. I think that version was a
Okay.
2012 version. So it was
Not a
a
gas guzzler.
SUV. Yeah, not a gas guzzler. But just like, to get from kid to kid, to get from your apartment to kid one to kid two to your
Yeah.
apartment again is a lot. And then that's assuming that that's all. Sometimes I would go from my apartment to kid one to kid two to kid three to my apartment, and then go
Hmm.
do homework. So that's
Yeah,
what they're dealing with.
for sure. And, when students tell me about, like, I'm having all these struggles and all this other stuff, it's like, I get it. Like, you
Hmm.
are not only trying to pass your courses, get your supervision hours, which companies are also not being super generous about, by the way. Um, you're also trying to, like, do your job and
Hmm.
do it well and make sure that you can continue to be favorable in your company's eyes. But then you're also, like, having to interact with your friends and interact with your family and pay for all these things and live and sustain and take care of your health. And there was a really great meme at one time. I'll see if I can try to find it, but it's like trying to do all these things and you're basically just snapping at the end of it, because it's like, how can I possibly do all of these things, wear all of these different hats, and survive and make it out basically sane?
Hmm.
Um, it's just asking so much of students in particular, and that I've always thought that that is just like the hardest place of getting to where I am at this point. I didn't think it at the time, but now I look back and I'm like, I don't
Hmm.
know how I did that. I don't know how students do it now. So we see you, we understand, we feel you, and if you are a student, and you need to ask for a leave of absence. There's no problem with that. Everybody needs to take a step back sometimes. There are options. Basically, don't suffer in silence. You know, if you have an
Yeah.
advisor or if you have trusted faculty you can go to, you know, please reach out because I can't speak for every faculty member, but I don't want you to suffer alone.
Yeah, and please reach out, and then also look into how your financial aid works and how the cost, because the way that the government is organized the way now, you know, they don't want to give, you know, support to students because this is who people voted for. You know what I mean? And you know, when you vote for the guy that, nah, I'm not even gonna go into it. Let me. You already know. You already know. I don't even need to say it.
No. But an important thing, you know, if you do want to provide support, you can call the organization directly that's being targeted on this, demand that they sign the fair contract, or you can follow the union and see if there's any sort of like protests or anything that you can also be a part of. So, important to share that information so that you are aware. And knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, also
Exactly.
keep in mind the financial aid changes because I know that there are a lot of students being impacted by the changes because we're not considered a profession any longer.
Yep.
Dun,
Yep.
dun,
Thanks
dun.
to, you know, who people voted for.
He who shall not be named. I'd rather say
Exactly.
Voldemort. I mean, let's be honest. Let's say Voldemort and not the
For
other
real.
name. No airtime.
For real. No
Yeah.
airtime.
So speaking of crappy things in ABA, do we want to pivot?
Yeah, yeah, let's pivot. So let's talk about this thing called IOA, Inter Observer Agreement. We're gonna define it first, and then I'm gonna share something when we talk about, you know, really critiquing what we're doing. So I just looked this up, so I don't even know. I haven't read this yet, but let's see what it says. What is the inter-observer agreement? When taking data about behavior, it can be a really good idea to have more than one person record the data, at least every once in a while. Inter-observer agreement, abbreviated as IOA, is the extent to which two different observers agree about the occurrence of a behavior or a specific metric of behavior. IOA data can tell you how clear or unclear an operational definition is, whether or not an observer needs more training in data collection, and other useful information. Okay, that's pretty good. There's lots of different ways to count IOA, but basically it's making sure that we're measuring correctly. When we're saying, oh, here's the behavior, here's the measurement, are they the same? So are we measuring so that we're accurately measuring the duration, the latency, the frequency, whatever, right? Um, so one of the things that I recently sent Robin, because I have huge problems with IOA, because you know B.F. Skinner did not do IOA. There's the idea that we need IOA is like, I get it, but at the same time we don't necessarily, science doesn't necessarily science isn't based on what we agree to be true. Science simply is.
Mm-hmm.
So I could collect data, it could be accurate, and we could not need IOA. But you
Right.
know, now it's heavily embedded into behavior analytic practices. And I shared this with Robin recently. RIP to the GOAT, John Eshelman. He said, I was bashing on IOA, and he said, I totally agree. I've been saying similar things about IOA for years, but here's the thought. How much of IOA is about power, like a new person being corrected by a so-called senior person who is acting as a second observer? Everyone seems to think that IOA is between two equals, but how much of it is really power differential? Like the old saying, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? Could there be a relation between IOA and gaslighting? And I love this. We all agree with this because it really, like, when you look in research, it'll say if IOA dips below 80%, we'll have a conversation and then we'll blah, blah, blah. So, what does that conversation look like? That looks like the head senior lead researcher saying everybody else is doing it
Do
wrong.
what I
This
do.
is how you knew to do it. And then they just do whatever he says, and then it changes. It supposedly gets fixed, and then everything's better. And that's how you fix IOA. Super problematic.
Is it? Is it how you fix IOA? I don't think that's it. Well, I lump IOA, procedural fidelity, and social validity all into the same category here because ultimately all of it is about power. All of it is about how the person responds in the environment. And that's why when I work with students on their projects, especially with research, I challenge all of it. It's like, but this is what the article that I'm replicating said. I don't care. I want you to do more. Like, you're here to learn, and we're going to learn, and we're going to figure this out. I definitely think that Eschleman's comments there could be a really interesting study where you intentionally have some IOA measures done with heavy bias
Mm-hmm.
versus some that are not. And you could look at that. And so that's something that maybe we should pursue because we're talking about this. And so maybe we should put our money where our mouth is. But that basically said, when we talk about like procedural fidelity, IOA, I ask students, so the second observer, are they going to be trained? Who's going to train them? How is the training going to look? How is the power balance going to look between the training, between the second observer and the person who's actually conducting the study? The person running the study already has bias. We know that because they have a purpose, they have a hypothesis that they want to actually fulfill. So that person arguably shouldn't be the one doing the training. They should be out of the picture completely. They probably shouldn't even be collecting the data. I'm just saying. If you
Mm-hmm.
want it to truly be objective, that's how you have to do it. And that's with the social validity measure, because if somebody sitting in front of you who has conducted the study, who generally like works with you, and you know that they have the power to change your program and do all these things, of course you're going to say what they want to hear. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's and the same thing with procedural fidelity. Like the person who wrote the plan is coming to you and saying, hey, are you following my plan? We don't think that's weird. Like it shocks me how few people question anything in ABA, and this has always been one thing that's bothered me, so I'm really glad you brought it up.
No, I 100% agree. And if we think historically, the principles of behavior science were founded by not somebody doing a direct observation and counting, but mechanical devices measuring behavior across time. Skinner left. He went home, and behavior was
Mm-hmm.
still occurring, being measured. And actually, in the this is something that a lot of people don't know that I learned from Dr. Andrew Bulla, and I think it's in Schedules of Reinforcement, or is it Organism of Behavior? One of them. The counter was off a little bit,
Oh,
so they found that. One, I think it was Ogden Lindsay was one of the people that helped find that, and then two, I think it was discrimination, or generalization was an accident. Let me see.
wow. Yeah, so
Because
we
I
can't always just go with what we assume to be the case. We have to really have the data to
Yeah,
support it.
generalization was a failure. Generalization was originally thought to be a failure to discriminate. So, so I mean, like these
Yikes.
things are like we really need to interrogate these because we have humans who, even when we say we're being objective, there is no objectivity.
That
There's
doesn't exist
always
with humans.
exactly. There's always some level of subjectivity. We could try to reduce it as greatly as possible, yes, but when we start with this ideal that I think comes from oh, you okay? Okay.
Oh, I
Um,
just stepped off my stepper.
okay. When we come this ideal that there's such thing as being objective, I think comes from white supremacy culture. And there's a lot of writing about it, but it's supposed to remove the individual from the environment that they're discussing, researching, talking about, which is impossible. Because first of all, why are you even discussing, interpreting, measuring, studying the environment that environment? It's because of your interest, because of your learning history, because of all these things that brought you here. And you can't divorce yourself from those.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
IOA has a lot of these problems, and I always like question when people like start talking about, oh yeah, with your inner behavior stuff, Jared, how can you IOA, IOA, IOA? And it's like your measures of IOA are already BS. So you're
Yeah.
trying to come to me with like this person is measuring their own behaviors. Can you tell if you have an anxious thought or a negative thought? Okay, yes. Then can you count it? Okay, yes. Okay, can you count it all day? Okay, yes. Okay, so you have a count. I mean, their count is as valid as any other count, especially when trained.
You're going to piss off all the old white men of ABA who established these measures as being the gold standard in ABA. So you better watch yourself.
My
Jeez.
presence is going to piss them off, and you know what? It's going to
Mine
improve the
too.
science.
I think
And you
both of
know
us
what?
are going to be SDPs for old white men.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
100%.
But some actually really some of the ones, like there are some that really love us, and like that
Good.
I really mess with, especially. I got one that just keeps on sending me like resources and research, and like sometimes they'll critique or really like give me more historical information in my videos,
Mm-hmm.
especially on Facebook. These are the ones that
Cool.
like are actually like long timers that'll be like, yeah, I was walking with Ogden Lindsley one day and he said,
What
and
a
I'm
wild
like,
flex, you know?
exactly.
Oh my
I was
God.
with B.F. Skinner and he was describing. Okay, tell me more. You know what I mean? Versus like
Yeah.
the old white men that's like, I wrote these studies and ABA has become changed because I'm not interested in ABA. I'm interested in behavior science. Let's start
Yeah.
there.
I'm interested in helping people. That's ultimately
Yes.
what I'm about. And like
Yeah.
that's the root of all of my values. And so if I see that something is not actually helping people and the power is imbalanced, I'm going to try to do everything I can to mitigate that power imbalance. So,
Exactly.
and I think that's ultimately what you and I like share that common value on, and especially our critique with behavior science. Um, I've actually pulled up a study. I've been kind of looking at it now. Full disclosure, I haven't actually like thoroughly read it yet, but let me see if I can actually. Okay, so it's on a different screen. There we go. So there is an inter-observer agreement study that I pulled up. It's from 2022, so it's fairly recent. But basically, it was a comparison of different percentages of IOA conducted throughout a study. So I think it was what, 5%, 10%, 15%. You know, we talk about like 30% of your sessions need to be collected for your IOA. Okay, so yeah, we had 10%, 15%, 25%, and 30% IOA. And basically, from what I can tell, there was no difference in like the amount of agreement, which is interesting to me because not only does this say, hey, we're basically wasting our time with IOA because regardless of whether you're trying to do like a 30% minimum for your sessions or like a 10% minimum for your sessions, you're going to probably get the same amount of agreement and the same data, but it also still perpetuates the same biases. And so if you have somebody who does the training who has something at stake, aka the
Mm-hmm.
researcher or the primary investigator, then guess what? Your training is going to be biased, and then therefore your IOA will probably match no matter how many sessions you do. And so I think it was just very interesting to kind of find this right before we started the conversation. But I'll make sure that the file is actually like in the Google Drive, and then I'll make sure to share it on the resources so that, you know, anybody, there's a lot of statistical analysis in here, and statistics, I think I've mentioned, are not my thing. I'm pretty sure I have dyscalculia. But I like once I got past like basic math, nothing made sense. You throw letters in with numbers, I'm out. So yeah, it's a really interesting sounding article, and I will go through it a little more thoroughly. But I thought it would kind of contribute to this conversation a little bit as well because it's like your IOA measure is silly.
Yeah. No, I agree. And a few things about that you made me think about. One, reviewers, so this is a peer reviewed article, right? So it means
Mm-hmm.
that peers reviewed it so that it can be published and seen
Allegedly,
as a scholarly academic article. Exactly.
yeah.
So we're taking a lot of things to just as assumptions, as beliefs. We're believing that they did these measures. We're believing they did the study. We're believing that all of these measures are accurately reported. Then we're taking, let's say, there's probably 2 to 3 reviewers that critiqued and decided whether or not to accept with minor revisions, major revisions, or reject, right? Then, though, between those reviewers, there's at least one editor above them that kind of pulls them all
All
together.
powerful.
Exactly. So, 3 to 4 people um, at minimum decide whether or not an article can become a scholarly article that everybody can cite that is then seen as valid information that everybody should just accept. So I think that bar is fairly low.
So
And
low.
and then there's this thing the white once again white supremacy culture has this thing where there's the way that they hold on, let me look it up.
I'm shocked that white supremacy would be at the root of something. Shocked.
Um, there's worship of the written word,
Oh
right?
God, yes.
So it's
Yes.
like, um, it's if it's not in a memo, it doesn't exist. If it's not grammatically correct, it has no value. If it's not properly cited according to academic rules that many people don't know or have access to, it's not legitimate. So all of these things are talking about how, like, unless it goes through these particular aspects or these particular hoops to jump through, then it's not valid forms of knowledge. We're talking about epistemology, right? How do we know what we know? Forms of knowing, ways of knowing. And a lot of times there's a lot of languages that didn't have written language, right? But they
Yeah.
still pass down knowledge orally. There's also a lot of times where languages did write it down and those written words were destroyed, right? By, colonization, by empire, by land theft, right? So all of that knowledge, according to the worship of the written word, was destroyed and to effect never existed. So we really need
Yeah.
to be careful when we talk about this worship of the written word. I don't want to get into anti-science where people, or anti-intellectualism where people say, oh, because it has such a low bar, it doesn't matter, it doesn't count. Because yes, it still does. When we have these peer-reviewed articles, they still matter, they still hold value. How we validate it is we replicate and we add more to it so we can make sure, okay, yes, that's true, yes, that works. But we also need to be very critical and we need to critique what we learn and what we hear. And we need to also accept forms of knowledge that aren't the traditional white standard.
It's so the worship of the written word, I think, is at the very base layer of ABA literature, but there's another layer to that I want to throw on there that's basically pro ABA culture. And that is where I have struggled as a researcher who goes against the grain and kind of ruffles a few feathers. But my research is not always affirming of ABA. Sometimes my research tells a different story through the data and says, hey, people don't like ABA, or the way that we're doing this is not great because it actually is not socially valid, and
Mm-hmm.
people don't like to hear that. And so there have been many times that I've had to publish outside of ABA to have my voice heard and my information and my data present and out there and available. And it's interesting because the pro ABA worship on top of the layer of the worship of the written word is so strong. And if you have not tried to publish in ABA journals, get ready because you're going to see that propaganda thrown at you constantly, with trying to remove as much bias as possible, which obviously, as you said, we all have biases. This is something that, as long as you're aware of the biases and you can actively like work on those, that's kind of the important piece because we can't remove them. But yeah, like some of the feedback that we've gotten is like, well, it doesn't seem like you're very accepting of ABA. It's like, well, maybe I'm not. Is that a problem? Because like if you can't accept criticism from your own field or from outsiders of the field, that's a cult. Full stop. That's
Absolutely.
not that's not academia, that's not science, because science is not pro ABA. Science is just science. Science is, and it's whatever the data present.
Yeah.
So
And to me, that's a full sentence. Science is. I think that one of the things that you were talking about kind of like leads me on to a bunch of other stuff because you're saying like certain publications of ABA journals, they won't accept it because it's
yep,
not quote unquote pro ABA. So think about
yep,
how that
the
shapes
filtering.
the literature base. Yeah,
Yep.
because I mean, if it has to be acceptable by their cult like standards, then the science can't grow in certain ways. The ways that it grows is very constrained and very set up by certain ideals and values. Science is a practice of its values.
The white
So
patriarchy.
exactly, and that shows, you know what I mean, what gets published and what doesn't get published. And sometimes stuff will slip through and get published, but look at its original version versus what
Oh,
was
for sure. Watered
take
down everything.
watered down, filtered out. It's sanitized. It's
Greatly
made so
sanitized.
that it's made so that it can be acceptable to the ABA. What is it?
Growers. I don't
Yeah,
know.
proers, and that's so problematic because it it diverges further even from the science of behavior and towards this behavior analysis, which I have so many problems and critiques with, that limit the ability of it to to be for socially valid in my perspective, and more of a thing that's about control.
For sure. And we all know who's in control and we all know who has the power. Look at the editorial boards of all of the journals that you're submitting to, and you'll get your answer. And
Mm-hmm.
the people walk the walk, they talk the talk. And if you don't do the thing, and like I've tried to assimilate into that so I can kind of filter in and get things pushed through.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't talk the talk ultimately because I think it's my autism. I just can't say things I
Yeah.
don't agree with. It's just not part of who I am. But that's the thing. Like by the time things get published, imagine the process of like the rejections. Imagine the process of like losing your voice in that process. We were talking about a student you're supporting and losing that voice, and I can't tell you how many times that particular person who happens to be a good friend of mine, um, we have been told to not use identity first language. Well, both of us then have to out ourselves and to say, hey, I'm actually autistic. This is what I prefer to say. Now we're unsafe because we have outed ourselves as disabled. And so that stigma instantly comes back, and it becomes a whole thing. And so ultimately we don't want to lose the voice of the author because they have something important that they're passionate about that they felt was worthy of conducting research on. And now you're
Mm-hmm.
basically saying, well, but it's not good enough. You're taking away that
Mm-hmm.
passion. So this alone is enough to have me walk away from ABA forever. But I decided to stay and fight because I know it's important. So if you are discouraged, you're not alone.
Yeah. And that goes right back to the objectivity of they want you to lose your voice so that you could sound like that objective collective that reinforces itself and its own values and ideals, instead of having those ideals and values being challenged, rightfully so, by the community it 80% serves. So yeah, no, I mean, I think that's that. I just, you know, there's so much change that needs to be had. Oh, and today is Tuesday, as we record, Tuesday, July 28th, and I'm still waiting for that journal to let me
Oh
know
my
if
God.
I got accepted or whatever. I sent them an email last week. I think I'm gonna send, like, I sent it to the person, but I think I'm gonna do it this time through the system of the reviewer stuff. Just because I'm just like, what are we
That's
doing here? You forgot about
ridiculous.
me again?
I would have thought you would have heard something back by now. But then again, like as the longer that it goes, the more likely you are to just continue to be left on red. That's
Yeah,
absolutely wild. And I've actually left a journal on read in my inbox. But sometimes it'll like time out. It'll be like
yeah.
you have so many days to
Seven
accept this,
days.
but
Yeah.
I don't see that on this one, and so I've left this journal unread. But I'm like, I've got other things I'm doing. I keep forgetting you because you're not my job and you're not paying me. So like I
And this
can't.
one says the reviews are completed. If
I know, that's wild.
the
It's not like you're waiting for people to go through the review process. You're simply waiting on the editor to
yeah,
get back to you. Probably already, and when an editor gets back to you, generally they'll copy and paste the reviewer's comments, but remove any identifying information, and then they'll just do like a brief little summary, like a paragraph or two. I've never received more than that from an
yeah,
editor, and
yeah.
so yeah, it's not like they have a lot to do. Like I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. I don't
Old
know.
white man's been an old white man.
I just want to get through this process so I can publish, so I can add
Preach.
it's like I'm waiting for this one to be published so I can add on top of it and build. And
Right.
it's hard to build when you don't have a foundation.
Yeah. Well, and so not to completely divert, but it kind of relates to this topic, and we can
Mm-hmm.
kind of summarize on this. So my peer and friend and I just got approval from the IRB to conduct a study, and we have a criteria that basically means that you have to either be in education psychology or applied behavior analysis, and you have to be either actively teaching research methods or chairing research projects, or you have done a peer review for an academic journal in the last 5 years. We've had several people go through the pre-screen, but no one has been qualified. And I think that that's telling, because we're asking people to do a thing for free that most journals will ask people to do for free as well. And so we're trying to build on that unpaid labor bit to compare and contrast, but gaining participants has been kind of a challenge. And it's like, but this speaks to like what we were discussing last week as far as all the time commitments that we are expected to make because we have those higher degrees, but we're also having to do all these other things in the process. And it's a lot. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. And it's like, well, of course the data are suggesting this, because the
Yeah,
ones who are willing are the ones who aren't generally being asked to do this free labor. So I find that
exactly.
very interesting. So regardless of whether your study is going in the way that you project it to be going, data are data, whether
Yeah.
it's successful or correct or not. So just to throw that out there, if that can help anybody with perspective.
It's the data are valuable, and I love how we're using data are, because data, the word is plural, and that's something that I've learned to. It's become a irk of mine when people don't use it plurally, but the way that they situate it in their sentence, it should be. Um,
It
Datum
sounds weird
is
at first,
singular.
but
It does,
you get
yeah,
used to
but
it.
especially when you're in certain fields and areas and higher education, you hear it more. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's what
100%.
I got. Leaving on a positive, my my one of my students passed their defense for their thesis
Awesome.
yesterday. Super happy. I've been
Final?
working with this. Yeah, final.
Yay! They're
They've been
official.
working on this for a long time. Yeah, and yeah, so I'm just very proud of them. They had a really interesting study, and they worked hard, and they finally finished. And we celebrate all these wins,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just happy to see them go off and flourish. And minor edits, but that's fine, because and they're fine with it. They're like, you know what, I'm over here. I'm at the last push, and
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna do that last push, and then go take that exam, and hopefully make more money and have more time and be done with school, which can be like, it's unfortunate that that's such a big reinforcer, because school has
Yeah.
so much aversive control.
Well, it's because of the way that the system is structured. It has nothing to do necessarily with like the school piece. Well, I can't speak for like the programs that people go through and everything. I'm sure that they're punishing enough, depending on the program and the professors and the content
Mm-hmm.
that they're being presented and the framework in which the content is being presented. But I always found school fun. That was something like if I could just be a student forever, I would. But this is my way of staying in academia and being a student forever because I am
Same.
teaching now. And so that's another thing I know you and I have like really shared that value on. Um, but yeah, it's kind of unfortunate, I think, that because of the way we frame the practicum type structure and the coursework and the supervision and all of that, it just becomes this lump of I just need to get all of this done. I need to get it out of my life. It's not seen as an opportunity, and that is really unfortunate because like when else are you going to be able to have the opportunity to just absorb as much as you possibly can? And yeah, it just kind of sucks because we've made it this contingency, and that's strictly what it is.
Yeah, it's an aversive contingency, and I think that maybe next time we could talk a little bit about school and its aversive control, and then maybe
Oh
dream
yeah,
up and talk about ways that we can improve the reinforcement in schools and within learning, so that it could be more fun, and kids
love it.
and adults could be running into school excited, and instead of leaving school, and when that final bell rings, kids slam open the doors, run super excited, happy. The aversive
Yeah,
control is finally over. I'd be happy
yeah.
too.
To be fair, my love of like learning didn't start till college. Like
Yeah,
everything before that,
same.
I was that kid first out the door. I was like, I hate this. I never want to go to school again. And then I went to college and I was like, whoa, I can actually learn what I want to. This is
Yep.
awesome.
I was a class clown because I didn't know what was going on, so I used that as an opportunity to escape. I was, in school suspension. I had detentions, and I wasn't even a bad kid. Teachers would say he's a good kid. He just he's not doing the work or doing it. Yeah. So,
It's almost
anyways,
like you were
next time.
bored. Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
I was very
we'll go
bored.
into that.
Please like, share, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you want us to talk about, and we would love to try to get to it. If you're watching this and you're one of our regular watchers, we really need you to like the video because it really helps get on the algorithm. If you see that hype button, press the hype button on YouTube. We've seen that there's been like a almost semi-consistent 12, 13, 14 people. Y'all, if y'all all just like it would be so helpful. So just hit that like button, please. And we have to say that, because we want to get this out there. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you.